Today is October 30th, 2019. Today is a Wednesday, and I'm hoping to make a video about an hour long. We shall see. You already know if I was successful or not. All right. I don't even know where to start. And I'm just depending on the Holy Ghost because I know this is something that He would have me to share with you. All right. So I'm going to start with a dream that I had on the 15th. So 2 weeks ago, I dreamed this. Okay, so I wrote this. The world was in flux and turmoil. If the word flux is unfamiliar to you, flux is change. It's like a process of change and transition. And turmoil, obviously we know what that is. So, in the dream, this family had one older son who was 17 or so, and two young sons that were toddlers. Brad Pitt played the teen, and the two young sons were played by young boys that looked like him also. So Brad Pitt was a teenager in this dream, and this dream was a movie. It was like a movie. It was actually a movie. So Brad Pitt played a teenage boy, and he had two young brothers that were toddlers. And the world was in turmoil and flux. It was like there was like order had broken down or was breaking down, but nothing solid had formed again from the breaking down. So anyway, so like I said, there was trouble brewing, and he was joking, telling his two little brothers about knowing that they didn't understand and they were playing. So Brad Pitt's sitting there and these two little boys are playing in front of him. They're his two little brothers. They're like wrestling around and playing on his legs and doing things that little kids would do. And he's talking to them as it would be a movie scene. And he's saying like, yeah, the world is a complete mess, but you guys wouldn't know anything about that, would you? So he's like half joking because it's a movie and, they make light of serious things in movies. So because there has to be entertainment value in a movie. If it's all sad all the time in a movie, no one would watch it. So there has to be, moments of levity. So this is just like a little comic relief in the middle of this movie where he's saying, I don't know where our next meal is coming from, or, everything is a mess, but you guys just keep playing because, that's what kids do. So he's talking like that, and they're paying absolutely no attention to him because they're like 2 and maybe 1 is 3. So they're not paying attention to him. And then he goes on and says how, says something like, it's a good thing you two don't have any girlfriends because they would prefer me over you. So he's just like joking with them about that, but really it's just entertainment for the movie because the little boys aren't paying attention to what he's saying. So then, like in another little area, there was a scene with Tom Hanks and some woman, which I think that the woman could have been the mother of Brad Pitt and the two little boys. So her and Tom Hanks are off like in like another room. So they were dealing with the conflict. And I was there looking through an old box or a trunk of my things, which had some pink and green sequined fabric and another thing. And I was wondering about these things, how I could repurpose them. So it's kind of like, if you were in the basement or somewhere, you're in an attic and you find an old box of your stuff. And so if you don't have a lot of resources at this current time, then you wouldn't throw anything away. You would see it and see value in it, even though in some other times that weren't so troubled, it might just be junk. But this was actually nice stuff, and I was trying to think, how could I use it? So I was trying to think how I could repurpose them. So at some point, my mother was making very tiny hats of decorative paper and rhinestones. One was black and white with some white polka dots on it. And it had a bow across the back, and it had rhinestones on it. Okay, they were no bigger than a 50-cent piece. The total size of the hat was maybe that big. So they looked pretty good, but they were parts of the hat glued together and not one integrated hat. So it would be like if you cut out a circle for the top, cut out a circle for the brim, and cut out something to be the wall, and you just glued it together. So, and then she also had been using, so I'm going to leave that part out because I don't think that really has to do with the world. That's just personal. So we'll leave that out because there's another thing she was doing that makes sense to me, but it's not pertinent to this. So anyway, I will say that what she was doing was silly. And I was thinking what a silly thing it was to be thinking about even doing something like that, given how everything in society and the world was so upside down. And then I wrote, she seemed contrary to everything that you should be thinking or doing. Like, if you should be sober, then these people aren't serious. If you should be, whatever you should be doing, what would be wise to be doing, they're just doing the opposite. And I know a lot of people have people like this close to them within their family. So that's all I'll say about that. So now back to the area where the box was and this Tom Hanks guy and the lady. So he was with the lady. So, and I said maybe she was the boy's mother. There was massive civil unrest everywhere. Massive civil unrest. And it was all being televised and broadcast. There was a right side and a wrong side. But the thing was, when you listen to them describe wrong or right, either side could be the wrong side that they were describing. The descriptions fit either side, depending on your point of view. I wasn't on either side, but one side seemed to be clearly totally wrong and evil and wild. And it was the side that was causing all the trouble. So then I wrote, I guess this was pretty much characterized as liberals versus conservatives. And then I also wrote status quo versus change. So if you think of this, the conservatives, they're the status quo. They are the system as it is. And then the liberals are the ones that are jumping up and down, protesting, and upsetting things in order to try and create change in the system as it exists. So, in other words, liberals versus conservatives, status quo, or change versus status quo, left versus right, if you will. So, as I sat near the box, listening to all the news reports of the clashes and turmoil, I heard one of the wild, wrong liberals speaking, and I realized that each side of them hears themselves as the good guys, hands down, no contest, and doesn't question to think any differently. Because the narrative that they have been given to discuss and argue is forest and trees. Within the narrative that both the conservatives and the liberals are chewing on at the moment, there is elements of right and wrong within each side's perspective. All right. There are abuses of our economic system. The system that we have has plenty of room to be criticized. So there are certain things that liberals say that have a kernel of truth in them. And then there are certain things that the conservatives say that certainly contain elements of truth. And then there are certain things that the conservatives are defending or perhaps failing to speak out against because it's just part of the status quo. It's just part of the way things always have been. It's kind of like, they say, well, nothing's perfect, but, it's the best we have. So they are defending things that could be better. And then they are legitimately pointing out the foolishness of the liberal position, the utter nonsense of the liberal position. If you have a problem with the boat that you're on and you're way out at sea, your answer cannot be to burn the boat because everyone's going to drown or burn to death. So, this is the strategy that the left has taken in the society. They're going to just tear down all traditions, tear down all the guideposts, all of the structure, all of the moral fabric, everything that people transmit from one generation to another that creates the stability of a society, and create chaos, make changes that they have absolutely no idea how they are going to affect the world. Reckless, wild. fantasy unicorn thinking. They literally believe in fairy tales. They literally believe that people are good, and they're godless. They're godless. Because if they had God, they would know that human beings are plagued with a fallen nature. And if they think that they're going to turn their lives and the world over to a massive government, a massive worldwide, all-powerful government of emotions that's going to just be good to them and look out for them, they're going to wake up under tyranny because they fail to consider the truth of evil, the fact of evil. No human being is fit to have dominion over other human beings. That power will corrupt them. God never gave us the power to have dominion over human beings. He gave them dominion over the earth, over the creatures within the earth, but not over each other. He gave a man leadership in his home after the fall. After the fall. Because now man had to have a law. Because man became lawless. So anyway, this is what's wrong with the liberals. They are unanchored to anything. Their thinking is totally disconnected. They are the product of 100+ years of a diligent effort to create such a person that thinks in such a way. Ready to call for world government. And so ignorant of God and of history as to believe that their fantasies and untested theories can work because people are just going to hold hands and dance around the maypole after they get high. And that doesn't work. And they don't even know enough history to know that it doesn't work. They don't have enough faith in God to know that man is a fallen creature and to be able to see things the way they really are. Okay. Like I said in his dream, I wasn't on either side because I do not identify myself as a conservative, although I do recognize that they are more righteous than the liberals. But let's look at what God thinks about a person that's just more righteous than, not as bad as the liberals. Let's hold that idea in, off to the side here. We'll get back to that. So I'm sitting there or in the area where the Tom Hanks character is, and the person who I believe was the mother of those of Brad Pitt and the two little boys. So I'm watching the news and I'm just listening to this, and I'm realizing that each one of these sides is thoroughly convinced that they're the right side and the other people are the wrong side. They are like, there's no possible way you can get to a meeting of the minds between these two camps, because they each feel that they got the other one like dead to rights. There's no way in their mind that they can be wrong. And because in actuality, like I said, it's forest and it's trees. So they'll be standing there arguing, saying, no, these are trees. And the other side says, look, you fool, these aren't trees. This is clearly a forest. So you can see they'll argue forever, both being right and both being wrong. And the point is that they'll just never come together, because one side is trained to recognize only trees, and the other side is trained to recognize and see only forest. And neither side is ready to swallow or accept that you are looking at trees and a forest. So the conservatives aren't able to say, well, yeah, Americans are immigrants. So when the liberals say, yeah, let's deport all the immigrants, the liberals can say to the conservatives, hey, yeah, well, when you leaving? You were an immigrant before I was, so when are you going? I'll leave on the boat after you leave. Which is true. Now you have to be able to acknowledge that. At the same time, the liberals aren't able, they're so disconnected from reality that they cannot see that you cannot bring people into a country that has systematically eliminated its entire job base. And what are left can hardly be called jobs. Because the wages and the salaries that are paid by these jobs cannot support the things that a person needs to function inside this society and within this economic structure. Housing alone can eat up the most of what people make. By the time you take housing and taxes, people are already broke. So we could go on and on and on about the economy. But so you have the liberals and they think, oh, everybody has the right to an education. They think that you can just open up your border. Like I said, in a place where all the jobs have been purposely and systematically eliminated. And then you're going to invite more people here. Not only bring them here, but once they can't find jobs, then you're going to implement systems and include them in systems that encourage dependency on social welfare programs. Still not understanding that, just like your mother, if you grew up with any lack, or you guys, if you grew up and your parents weren't wealthy, you didn't have enough of everything, you might have gone through this. I had this experience. My mother, we wanted something, and she said, I don't have any money. And I said, well, why don't you write a check? I was about 7. And I said, why don't you write a check? Because I didn't understand, just like the liberals don't understand, that the government just issuing money, just printing money, just borrowing money, just writing things down in a budget and then just make it happen. Someone has to pay for that. Someone is going to come calling for those dollars one day. If you have a country that is insolvent, meaning that it cannot pay its bills, then you have a country that is not sovereign, meaning that it is the people inside of it are not free. They will become slaves of the lender where you're getting this money from. They don't understand that there are things called central banks that borrow our money supply into existence as interest. That each of us is being taxed and taxed and taxed and taxed to pay, which is a huge part of the reason why you can no longer afford your house, why you can no longer afford rents, why people are back at home with their parents, with their families. Because the more money you just print and print and print, and the more programs that you just implement and implement and implement, these so-called social safety nets, in addition to encouraging people to come onto these systems and to become dependent upon them as a way of life and to bring up other generations dependent upon them, in addition to the fact that it encourages a negative behavior inside society, it also causes more money to go out, more paper money to go out, more currency to go out into the system, which makes the money that is already in the system buy less and less and less and less. So every dollar that the government spends on a welfare program, whether it is housing for so-called poor people, whether it's WIC, whether it is educational grants or loan programs, Medicaid, Obamacare, whatever. Everything that everything that the welfare state produces, every program, every law that was signed in place to so-called take care of the poor, sends the price of everything that you have to buy higher and higher and higher. That is a fact. Every dollar that the government borrows and spends into the economy makes each of those dollars buy less and less and less, while you're making at the same time less and less and less money. And it's going to get to the point where it's like a collar that you put on a puppy when it was really tiny. And the collar's not getting any bigger. That's your paycheck. But you, as the puppy, what it costs you to live is more and more and more and more dollars, because each of the dollars is worth less as the government borrows and borrows and borrows. Borrow, borrow, borrow is the same as print, 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 is the same as spend, 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 is the same as help, help, help. So each dollar causes that puppy to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And his paycheck is just like this. And they don't realize that you're going to die. You are being choked out. And eventually the United States is going to fall over. This is a fact that people cannot wrap their head around. They can't. It happens all over the world. It has happened all through history. Governments and nations have corrupted and borrowed themselves right out of existence. Over and over and over again, there's nothing new under the sun. But because of what you hear across your television, because of the foolishness of ridiculous economic theories and the assurances that you receive from whatever paid liar happens to do the CBS World News and Night Report or whatever it is they got now, Nightline, Dateline, Good Morning, this, that, and the other. Because of this smiling faces that tell lies every morning, noon, and night, and telling them that everything is okay. Peace and safety. Peace and safety. We can create a better world. We can borrow our way into another world. We can enslave ourselves right into a better world where people are going to, in spite of the fall of man, cooperate and love each other and just do the right thing. If we could just get rid of all these bigoted Christians and all these people who offend us. If I could just silence all the people that disagree with me and hurt my feelings, we're just gonna have a better world. And then we can do things that have never ever worked before. And they'll work now because I believe in unicorns. And they've been raised this way. They've been educated this way. And they have not been taught to think logically. They have purposely been taught to be illogical. And I literally mean that. I've looked and looked for the dream that God showed me. But the children were being educated to be illogical. So anyway. All right. So when people watch the news, when people watch debates, when people see, opinions spewing back and forth in Twitter and Facebook and all the places where they receive their daily misinformation, they are fed narratives. They're not thinking. They're not analyzing. They're not scrutinizing. But they are just absorbing, receiving. And depending on their point of view, depending on whatever groove they've been put in, if they were born into middle-class, wealthy family, if they were churchgoers, they'll be more conservative. If they have benefited more than suffered under the status quo, they'll be for this system that we have now. If they have been underdogs, or if they are people who grew up privileged, but they are bleeding hearts, drug around by their emotions, or just thoroughly indoctrinated, then they're going to be liberals. They're going to want change at any cost. They want to burn the boat in spite of the fact that we are, 400 nautical miles away from the shore with no lifeboats. Let's start a new world. And somehow it's all going to work out. So the narrative, each one, when they watch the news, when they watch the reports, when they watch whatever mass media they're consuming, even though they may be seeing the same incidents, receiving the same message, but contained within the message is a dualism. They show them the picture. One group is triggered to see the trees. The other group is triggered to see the forest, even though they're looking at the same picture. And it all has to do with the way they've been educated. Inside that picture, they're inside whatever reports that they're showing, there are two narratives, at least two. The two main ones that lead you to either be for the status quo or for the change. Obama, the change we need. I'm here to fundamentally change America. So the narrative that each one walks away with after seeing the same information reinforces what they already believe. There's a video. It's called the Zapruder film, something like that. It is a video. It's a film that was shot on the day that JFK was assassinated, John F. Kennedy. He was a United States president that was, he was murdered driving down the street, assassinated in a parade, 1963, November of 1963, in a motorcade, in a black convertible Cadillac, with his wife sitting at his left, a congressman and his wife sitting in front of them. It was a 3-row limo, and then a driver and a passenger in the very front seat. So there were 3 rows of seats, and the president was in the very back. You know, he's waving at the crowd. The street is lined with people watching the parade. So he's shot. He shot once, and he grabs his neck. That shot came from behind. Then he's shot again from the front, and you see his head blow back and just chunks, just a spray flies off. It's something out of a Martin Scorsese film. So now on that film, the Zapruder film, I might not be pronouncing that right, but I saw a video one time that said the driver shot JFK. Now, if you trust the government, you believe the official report, what was that thing called? It had a name. I can't think of it, but they appointed a commission to investigate, whether there was a conspiracy to kill JFK. And just like the 9/11 commission, and it issues an official statement, it'd be like a book. like something big, like a telephone book of their final report. And whatever they come out with, that becomes law and order. That becomes, government gospel. So they said that John F. Kennedy was shot by one lone gunman from the front and the back, driving down the street. And not only that, the bullet that shot him from behind, that blew his head backwards, like that. But it didn't come from the front. It shot him from behind. He's only shot once, okay? And then this bullet, they call it the magic bullet. People facetiously call it the magic bullet because, hey, you know what? It went up into the row ahead of him in the car and shot the congressman. And it shot him twice. The same bullet that shot JFK shot this man twice. Like once in the arm and once in his thigh. Amazing. Amazing. So just this ridiculous report. But if you trust the government, if you believe the news, if you buy the myth, if you love the system, this was easy to believe. You see the forest. Our government loves and takes care of us. Dun, 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 dun. That's who you are, It's great. But if you're mistrustful of the government, if you realize and recognize that not only does our government lie to us, but every government that's ever existed lies to the people. That assassinations are probably at least half, if not more, of the way that power has usually been transferred in the past. But these people haven't been taught enough history to even know that. On purpose. So they see the trees. So you have the people who will overly scrutinize. So anyway, I watched this video and it said that the driver shot JFK. And at that time, it really looked like the driver shot JFK. And somebody in the comments said, listen, people, the driver did not shoot JFK. It's the light bouncing off the head of the passenger that's sitting to the right of the driver. And I said, yeah, right. These people will say anything, idiots. Of course he shot him because it really looked like he shot him. And I believed that for about a year. Until one day I was watching it. And I slowed it way down. And it really was the light bouncing off the man's head. The driver absolutely did not shoot JFK. But because of my point of view, I look at the same evidence that someone else looks at. And because my mind is already clouded with what I hold on to. The government is scum. They'll lie to us. That I really wasn't ready to just see what was really there. Or to properly scrutinize it. To have an open mind. To believe that. To have an open mind to be able to properly scrutinize every bit of information that we get. So there are narratives contained within the news. And sometimes the same piece of news can speak one thing to one person and to one side, to the conservatives. And that same piece of news will carry a different message to the liberals and keep them inflamed. And it will purposely contain something to fuel both of them. Depending on whatever commentary that you're hearing, it will sway you one way. Now, I would have never thought that the driver shot him had I not seen the title of the video, and I looked for that. When I looked for that, that's what I saw. When I stopped and really scrutinized it for myself, I said, much as I would love to believe, the driver just shot JFK, it's just not true. It fits everything that I want to believe, but it just isn't so. It doesn't mean that there was not a conspiracy. There obviously was a conspiracy to murder JFK, but the driver didn't do it. But there may be some people who aren't ready to be open enough to say the driver didn't do it, or to even really look to see what would it look like if the driver didn't do it. Let me look for the driver to not be doing this. That's what I had to do. So I'm trying to think of another example. Okay, there's a video that came out. It was filmed in, I think, 2000 or 2001. And it's of Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the Prime Minister of Israel. He's been in power there for something like at least 20 years. He is saying, I have the U.S. wrapped around my finger. He's saying, don't worry about the U.S. We can handle the U.S. They do what we tell them. They do. We can manipulate them. But there are certain people who watch that same film and say, God, all he's saying is that, look at that film and feel like this man is saying that God is with us. God is for us. We don't have to worry about the Americans. No one can stand against us. When clearly the man really honestly is saying, I can do whatever I want and handle the American people later. Handle America later. America is a thing that can easily be handled. That's what he says. But there are certain people that, because of their point of view and brainwashing of propaganda, believe that he couldn't possibly be saying that. So since he couldn't possibly say something like that because they believe something else, that, they just reinterpret it. That he meant something else. That he meant that, what he actually meant was, God is for Israel. The person who posted the video or reposted the video actually said, somebody asked the question like, what does this mean or something like that? Who is Israel in these end times? And the guy who posted the video, reposted the video, he says, Israel is the apple of God's eye. And you can't do anything with people who, like I said, are set in propaganda. You can't get through to them. That's the nature of propaganda. They have to have an open mind to look at the facts. They have to know and believe and take the advice of the Bible that says to prove all things. Prove everything. Run it through the mill. Scrutinize it. Make sure you're not running off foolishly. What if I would have came on here and made a video? The driver shot JFK. Well, there goes my credibility. Because he didn't. He didn't shoot him. That film does not show that. All right. So, when these two camps, the conservatives, the liberals, or you could call it the status quoers versus the changers, when they watch what's going on in the world and they watch whatever news channel they watch and hear the narratives that are being spun for them, each of them seeing the same information comes away with their own point of view having been reinforced. So the same narrative containing two messages, one for each side, to get them more deeply entrenched in what each of them believes. So the consequence of that is that they're both wrong and they're both right. They're both wrong and they're both right. So the question of who's wrong is just a null and void question, because they're both wrong. They're both wrong because they're deeply entrenched in what each of them believes. They're deeply entrenched in their own opinions. And the fact is, this whole system is disgusting. Whether it's the status quo or it's the change, it's government by man. It's government by fallen man. It's a wicked system run by a wicked being. I'm going to let that be the end of part 1.